Hello, and welcome to the second episode of No Facts, All Logic. I'm your host, Cam,
I'm your host, Joe.
and today we're going to be talking about communism. But first, how was your weekend, Joe?
It was very interesting.
What'd you do?
I went on a 9-hour motorcycle trip yesterday,
Holy fuck.
and the places we went were gas stations.
Yeah.
It was an experience. I'm glad I did it,
Yep.
and I learned a lot about handling my bike because I just got my license last fall,
Right.
and this was definitely the most riding time I've spent, especially on the Honda. It was brutal. There was a baby bear that ran out in the middle of the road during the ride. About 5 hours in, I know it was the climax of fun of the trip because I found myself man, how is this legal? Have you ever asked yourself that? When something becomes you're just having a blast and it's how is this even legal?
To have too much fun. So what time did you guys start? Or who went, I guess?
So it was me, Jason from work,
Okay.
and one of his buddies.
Nice.
We met down at a restaurant, and I got there at 9, which was the game plan the day before, and I don't have cell service on my phone, so he ended up texting me around 9:03 saying, "Oh, it's gonna be 9:30 before we make it over. We're kind of dragging ass," and but I didn't get that.
No.
And so I got down to the restaurant, and the restaurant's name is the same as the middle school.
Oh,
and
right.
I waited 15 minutes, and I'm like, there's no other bikes here, and I don't want to go inside. And I'm like, you know what? Let's just head down to the middle school and see if that's what he meant. Even though he clearly was saying a restaurant, maybe there's a food truck down there
Right.
or something. So I left the restaurant, go over to the middle school, and I'm like, I'm such a fucking idiot. Of course there's not a food truck here. And so I circled back around, and I'm like, you know what? If I'm being stood up, I'm just going to get some coffee and go on my own adventure.
Right.
Which would have been very, very stupid with no cell service, by the
Right.
way. So they met up with me, and then we headed off at 10 o'clock, and we rode up to the White Mountains, and then he's a few gas stations up there, and he's like, yeah, so now we're going to Mount Washington. And I'm like, I don't know how far away that is.
Right.
One gas station later, we're there, and he's like, oh, the restaurant where we were going to, turns out it's closed, so we're heading straight back. And at this point, I'm pretty sore, and I'm like, good, I think I'm reaching my limits.
Yeah.
The ride back's another 2 hours, by the way,
Right.
from Washington, which is 100 miles, basically exactly for where we fueled up.
Yeah.
And to where we are. And I can't tell you, I've never felt more miserable than the town right outside of Dartmouth, because I had no clue where I was. It felt like we were never going to stop again. I was so sore. And then when we drove into Dartmouth, and I saw one of their campus signs saying Dartmouth whatever dorm, and I'm like, oh my god, I'm only 45 minutes away. The relief I felt in that moment was incredible.
Right.
And since it was a busy day at Dartmouth, there are stop signs for pedestrians. Go for 30 seconds. It was incredible. I put my bike in neutral and was able to stand right then and there. Oh, the relief.
I was going to say good relief.
It was so relieving.
So it's kind of like a roller coaster of emotions. You were excited to do it, the long trip. Then you got miserable, and then kind of a relief at the end.
That town outside of Dartmouth, whatever it's
Is it
called,
Hanover?
It's might be the I'm not familiar with Hanover, but I think Dartmouth and Hanover are the same.
Yeah, it's
town.
right in the center. Yeah.
Yeah. So it probably was Hanover where I was feeling miserable. I'm just not familiar with it.
Yeah.
But I know Dartmouth.
Yeah.
Oh, Dartmouth is only 45 minutes away because
Right.
it's the biggest hospital around. So we were going from So that was the most miserable I felt in a while. Probably like 5 years since I
Wow.
felt that miserable.
Right.
Um, and then like when I got home, it was incredibly relaxing. Like I was at peace, if that makes sense.
Right.
And it's like, well, I get that. I only feel that fractionally if I do like a heavy workout.
Right.
Like, I never push myself that hard during a workout because usually my body's like, no, you can't. You're shaking. Like, you can't go on. But on a motorcycle trip, with an hour left or 2 hours remaining, it's like, no, you gotta get home. What are you gonna do? You're just gonna walk around like a hobo? Like, you gotta make it home. And it was pretty brutal, man.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you enjoyed the experience. I'm glad you got to, kind of entertain that a little bit, and glad it was a relief when you got home. Sorry for you being miserable part way through it, but
I also was super craving swimming, something
Really?
I haven't done in like since high school. And it was warm, but not too hot. But we were like driving past all the lakes and stuff, and I
Right.
think like just being constantly warm, and then we're constantly driving by water, like something primal like came into my system, like, ooh, water's good, ooh, swim. And like I just was craving going swimming, and I think if I like plan another 5 hour trip, it's got to be like going to like a lake I've never been to or
Right.
something where like swimming is the goal or some activities the goal, because just stopping and getting a feel and just riding for the ride, like I enjoyed it 5 hours in, but
Yeah.
man,
No, it's a beautiful area up there. You got the Kangamangs Highway, you got the White Mountains. I did a Reach the Beach race with my uncle and a few other people 4 years ago, 2019. So we went up and it was fall. It was September, so yeah, it was like fall time, and we went up to the White Mountains and just going up there at like 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning. You're driving through, you see the clouds. It's just beautiful sunrise. Um, so then we started the race and we ended up in Hampton, but it was completely different. So it was like we started up, northern New Hampshire, and we had to run for 24 hours straight, like as a team. So it was,
Yeah.
but you take turns. Each person has 3 legs. So we were all running, but it was just nice being up there, and it was like refreshing.
yeah,
So then we got to Hampton, bunch of other people finishing on the beach and stuff like that. But it was just like it was an awesome 24 hours.
yeah.
But
Shall we move on to communism?
I was gonna say, yeah, we're gonna go right into it.
Yeah.
So, all right. So talk about communism today. What economic system we think is best, and then what kind of government system we think is best, along with
That's just a
economic system.
timestamp, by the way.
Okay.
Relax.
So where do you stand on this? What do you think of communism? Do you think it's good? Any pros to it?
The only, I think inevitably humans will end up in a communist system.
Why do you feel that way?
It's just with robotics and AI continuing to improve, I think the need for human labor is going to become less and less needed.
Mm-hmm.
But the human aspect of people will still remain in demand because we're social and we want to interact with people. So, and all that's fine and good. I think where communism has failed in the past is, like, if you look at the Soviet Union, is that they don't invest in innovation at all. They see their people as part of the resource for the government to use. And if they're like, well, people need more shoes, so let's give the shoe manufacturer more people to make shoes. It's part of their whole, like, everyone needs a job kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, well, not everyone needs a job. Sometimes you just need better equipment. Like, if you could get a machine that does 5,000 shoes instead of a person that does 10 shoes a day, right?
Right.
Like one of those is much better than the other. And in Russia, at least, they didn't really care about that because you can give them 500 people to make 10,000 shoes, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that math definitely checks out.
Yeah. But in communism, it's people get on paper it looks great. It whatever people. Some people might say it's a great system, but people get paid off of their abilities. Like they get a job off their abilities, right? So, but if they're already born into something like poverty, and they don't have good education, they don't have good resources growing up, they're not going to get a good job, like a good paying job. So it's like, I guess the government control, no freedom of speech, all this stuff, like you get paid off of your abilities. Well, at least in the economy that we have now, it's like people, say, are able to thrive, like owning their own businesses and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Like kind of a laissez-faire government. People can kind of choose, what they want to go to school for, or what they want to, access to better paying jobs and healthcare and stuff like that. So
yeah, one thing I think capitalism can achieve better than communism is the fact that historically, when capitalism societies like has failure, like the Great Depression or something, we do recover from that.
right.
Versus when a communist system begins to crumble, they completely collapse, right? We saw that in the Soviet Union, where their economic structures started to fail, and then all of the countries wanted to break away.
Yeah.
There's a lot of history behind that, like the cruelty that Russia was doing and stuff like that.
Well, not just them. I mean, North Korea, Cuba,
Yeah.
other, communist and socialist states, countries. It's depriving their people of opportunity.
You think we'll ever become friends with Cuba again?
I don't know. There's a lot of things factors that go into that, like rebuilding a relationship. It's I think there's room for growth and whatnot. I think that there's opportunities in the future, but how do we get to those opportunities?
Because I have no idea why we don't like Cuba. Like, I really don't. I think we had like military operations down there, as well as I know we have that prison in Cuba that I think they don't care that we have it there. But those are the only two things I know, and I couldn't even tell you like when they happened.
That's the thing. Like, I don't understand it. I don't understand why we don't get along with a lot of countries. I mean, I do, but I don't. I just think that in the future, maybe many years from now, maybe a couple years from now, we could build relations with Cuba again. But I think it's just opposite ends of the spectrum too. I think when a country is like the United States has capitalism, democracy, freedoms, and stuff like that, I think Cuba's the opposite. I think it's kind of hard to have like a positive, I'm saying, like, not a positive negative, but like you have someone on this end of the spectrum and then someone on this end. They just don't see eye to eye on things like that, like relations and stuff.
I guess I've never seen a news article where it's like the Cuban dictator's unusually cruel, like what we'll see in like North Korea or China, where they're every moment is like they're trying to like screw over America and stuff.
Yeah.
I just don't see that from like articles from Cuba, and it's like
I think it's the personal accounts of people that grew up in that society, or their dads and their aunts, their uncles, and stuff like that. Like
you, like the refugees that came over.
Yeah, and I think that I think that there's a reason why people are refugee, and not just from there. I mean, from all over. But there's just a good example. There's a ton of athletes who are Cuban that seek asylum to the United States, and their family, or their moms, their dads. There's UFC fighters. There's Jorge Masvidal is a great example. Dad came to the United States, basically built a life for his family and stuff like that. But that's what I think capitalism allows for people. But I think that it's hard because we have three classes: rich, middle class, and poor. But you gotta, the middle class has to make up the difference for
I think we have way more classes than that.
No, think about it. You have the rich, right? You have the middle class, and then you have the poor.
Let me add a few
What
more.
other classes would there be?
All right. So there are the Omegas. We got our Bill Gates. We got Elon Musk. We got Jeff Bezos, right? These guys have, I would equate the Omegas as 10 billion or more, right? And then we have the wealthy. I only consider people wealthy over 10 million, but not like stupidly wealthy under like 10 billion. And then under them, we have like what I would consider wealthy still.
Okay, but see, this is you're going
So
Omega.
hold
So
on,
you're
let
going,
me get to the lowest
I'll
of
let
the
you
low.
talk, yeah.
At the very bottom, we have insane people that are not mentally stable. These are our homeless. And then we have poor people that are usually there because of like medical bills and stuff like that. And then we have everything in between. I think it's a lot more like. I think it's because what's the average American wage right now?
I'd say probably like 40 or 50,000.
I think that I would agree with it with our area.
Somewhere around there,
particularly.
you know.
I think if you count for big cities and stuff, I think it's like
Might be a little more, but
like 60,000. Yeah.
60 or 70. I mean, but look at the cost of living in New Hampshire alone. You have to make $25 an hour, like just to afford to live in New Hampshire at least. Like the cost of California is like I think almost $40 an hour.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like you can when you're talking about wealthy, what is that spectrum? Is it like $100,000 to $1 million in your wealthy? Is it like how do you look at wealthy? Because you could say somebody is making good money, like $80,000 a year, and they're set. They could be making $60,000 a year, depending on what state they live in, and be pretty well set. Are they wealthier than the Omegas?
Mm-hmm.
Like I think because here's the thing: if you go to Gordon Ramsay's steakhouse, not Gordon Ryan's the jiu-jitsu player, but if you go to Gordon Ramsay's steakhouse, right, the cost of steak is going to be the same no matter what, right? So if it's a $45 steak, $50 steak, or whatever it is, if you're making $80,000 a year, you could go. If you were making $50,000 a year or $40,000 a year, so I think that there's really only like you're the 10 billion up, but you could go to the same steakhouse as Elon Musk and get the same steak. Now, if it's like a $50,000 dinner, then yeah, you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But I mean, who the fuck would want to pay, thousands of dollars on a fucking dinner when you go to Longhorn and spend like $100 for a couple people?
It's usually not like really successful, like wealthy people that do that either. Like maybe once in a while they splurge like that, but typically it's like people that inherit a lot of money or like win the lottery. Like my brother just went out and like 3 weeks ago he went out and spent like a stupid amount. I think it was a place in Ludlow, like the ski resort.
Oh, okay.
And he said, yeah, he got crab legs and a few other things, and he's like, it was a very mediocre service. Each thing, like I think the kids menu was like $35 a meal. Like, and I'm like,
what the
dude,
fuck?
and he's like, I've never been more ripped off in my life. He's like, the only thing they had going was their service was pretty decent. And I'm like, the service is getting like 15% of a tip. Like, if they don't have incredible service, it's like they need to find new waiters.
I don't know. I think that's the thing. It's hard because I feel like the middle class kind of gets shafted. But I mean,
Why do you think that?
well, because you have to make up the difference somewhere, right? And they're extremely wealthy, don't want to give, millions of dollars a year to people who they feel like don't deserve it. But the middle class trying to look at the taxes. I mean, New Hampshire is expensive to live in because we have like two or three taxes in the whole state.
Most
like
of
your
it
income
is funded by like land tax.
Yeah, like property tax and stuff like that. Prepared food tax. But I think in like New York and stuff like that, look at how much it costs per square foot. You know what I'm saying? Like how much the rent is. But people are making, hundreds of thousands of dollars on average probably there. But compared to New Hampshire, people here might be making, I don't know, $50,000 to $60,000 on average, which is pretty good. But you go to like Arkansas or New Mexico, and the wages, because everything balances out more. But you always hear about it, and you kind of see it. The middle class definitely is like, you're not quite poor, but you're not really rich either. You're somewhere kind of in the middle. Mm-hmm. So that's why I think that there's only, which is good in capitalism. It is good because I mean I think that there's opportunity for growth for people. Whereas in communism, there's really not a lot of growth for people. The government kind of has control over everything. Here we have a laissez-faire, a hands-off, government that allows for people within society to make decisions for themselves and their families.
You know what I consider middle class?
What?
People that have the opportunity to retire wealthy. That's what I consider
But
middle
how
class.
much? Okay, so with everything, how expensive everything is, and the debt just continuing to rise, like trillions of dollars in debt, right? The United States is. What would you say the average person would need to retire right now? Even living within their means, what would you say that the average person needs to retire?
It depends on household to household, right? Because what you need to retire is going to be different than what I need, because you got like a wife that you need to take care of, you got kids.
Yeah.
I would say to retire right now, from the current work I'm doing, I would need $3 million, and that would set me up for the rest of my life. However, if I'm 65, I would have to do the math. I think there's a rule of thumb. It's like you need to be able to live like off of 2% of your overall portfolio. Mm-hmm. Like, so if you have $1 million in your portfolio, that means you need to be able to live off of 20,000, right? Is that the math? 20,000 a year. All right, he's doing some math. He's calculating. He doesn't trust my head. Because 10% would be $100,000.
Yeah, I just like to make sure that's 2%.
Yes.
100,000. Or
yeah,
$1 million. Okay.
Yeah. So add a zero.
I was like, that's why I was confused. I was like,
Gam's like $2,000 a year.
Yeah, I thought. Yeah, for some reason I typed in 100, but yeah.
So that's why I said $3 million gets me to $60,000 a year, which is competitive with what I'm making right now.
Yeah, I see that. No, I think it's just because I think 65 is, you don't really have many years to. So it's like you have some people that, and that's the other thing too that's good, is that you have the opportunity, right, when you start working, depending on where you might be at the same job for 30, 40 years, right, and you're investing heavily, you might be able to own your own business. But that's the beauty of capitalism, is that you have the opportunity to, the individual within each state and within society has the opportunity to, if they want to attempt to do it, own their own business, right? And then you can profit from that. Yeah, you still have to pay taxes, you still have to pay rent, you still have to pay labor costs and a lot of overhead stuff, but you're able to profit for yourself too.
Yes.
So then your retirement, to go from 60,000 a year, right, to 120, could go to 300,000, and now you're like, okay, I'm living within my means. I still have this much money in the bank, but I could retire at 50, 55 years old. I could retire at 40, depending on, you could have a company that takes off and you're making $5 million a year, right? $10 million a year. Now, how much of that is profit? Because you have your revenue and then you have your profit. So if your profit margins are insanely good, and you can put money in retirement or invest it in passive income, you have the opportunity to do that. But communism, you don't. And that's one of the key differences I see, is that the individual within the United States can thrive and profit and provide more opportunities for themselves and their families. Whereas in communism, the government gets all the profit. They get all the fucking,
It's also probably a great reason why capitalism is a good way to adapt to a crisis.
Yeah.
It's because people are like, oh, I'm going to starve, and the government is taking a while to, like, adjust. So let's just figure something out. I got to sell something. I got to make something. I got to do something to support my family. After, like, complaining to the government, like, hey, we need help. Eventually, the U.S. does step in and, like, actually give us the relief. Like, that we got out of the Great Depression with policies and, the war effort. Usually when we see a high war effort, we see an increase in the economy. And I think, like, right now we're living in a moment where, like, the U.S. is spending a lot on military infrastructure. And the economy's, like, sort of, like, below average. And I think that's almost a lie. But, like, if you see at the job numbers and stuff right now, it's actually, like, unemployment, it's, like, it's kind of hard to find new employees right now.
Yeah.
And so I think, like, every military manufacturer out there is struggling to find people, even though they want to crank up, like, how much they want to outproduce. Like, I saw a news article down in Pennsylvania about, like, an artillery manufacturer that's like, yeah, we're moving at full pace, like, as much as we can do. And they're like, we're not allowed to talk about the client at all. And I'm like, oh, it's Ukraine. Obviously, if you have a massive input of, like, artillery rounds, your main client is Ukraine for this project. And I'm like, yeah, let's blow up some Russians. I'm very, very for blowing up Russians right now.
There you go. We'll send you over there. No, I think it's good because I think that there's a lot of opportunity to adapt. I think there's a lot of opportunity for people to profit and to make a life for themselves that they want to do and to have that liberty and those freedoms. I mean, as much as people hate them, and I'm not the biggest fan, but gotta give them credit. The Paul brothers, Jake and Logan, I mean, these guys are making millions of dollars off of, their own brands, their own stuff, their own deals. And, like Logan and KSI, came up with Prime, and now they have a deal with the UFC as, like, the main drink. So it's like, how much money are those guys making every year? And then if they wanted to, they could probably retire within another couple years, right now, or if they want to keep doing this for another 10, 15, 20 years, five years, they could.
Yeah, I think the Logan brothers definitely represent
the Logan or the Paul brothers.
Oh, is it Paul brothers?
Yeah. I just noticed that. I was like, but no, I get what you're saying.
I think they strongly represent what capitalism is. They represent the influencer side of capitalism, which is sort of weird.
So is that what you were talking? Not to cut you off, but is that what you were talking about with, like, the different tiers? Like, because I think that there's 3 classes, but within those classes there could be tiers.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a separate class. It's the same thing. But I could get, like, you have tier 1, tier 2, tier 3.
I think they behave very differently. I think they definitely behave extremely differently than, like, for example, super wealthy people do whatever the fuck they want. They are literally the freest people on earth.
But these guys could do whatever the fuck they want too.
The Logan brothers, I don't think could.
The Logan or the Paul?
The Paul brothers, I don't think they could.
Okay, so hang on, because if we were talking about this earlier, right? If a $35 steak is a $35 steak, but what could they not do?
So, right now, the reason they're not the freest they could be is because they have to appeal to people in a certain way that makes them act a certain way. They have to act in a way that makes clicks happen, in a way that interacts with people, versus if you go to, like, Jeff Bezos, he literally could He just doesn't have to give a fuck.
But what about Elon Musk?
He literally doesn't have to give a fuck.
But he doesn't have to act a certain way to get funding or to get people to to cause an uproar. Like when he bought Twitter and he reinstated Trump and Andrew Tate and all these other people, right? People were fucking outraged, right? But he still has like 200 million followers across the platform. So it's like, but if he just acted like this shy, quiet guy, right? And he didn't try and start a bunch of drama and bullshit, do you think that he'd be as popular? So I feel like a lot of this stuff is like because of how he acts. He throws these massive parties. He at the SpaceX Center in Texas. He goes on Twitter and posts a bunch of bullshit, whatever. He doesn't have to act a certain way to gain followers and to gain notoriety.
I think his notoriety is already like concreted in with the SpaceX project. I think these projects that he started up speak for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
When you have control of such like popular companies, the companies will do all the speaking for themselves by the board of directors. And even though you're like the head guy, you get the credit for the company. And no matter what you do, it sort of sees like, oh, this is just like what a successful person looks like. Like, we could see Elon Musk out there like picking his nose every day, and it's like, yeah, that's just what wealthy people do. It's like they don't. Why would he care? Like, if he spreads germs, like, he doesn't care. He's gonna have full healthcare and whatever. Like, when.
You're right.
I just realized like the argument was kind of silly, but
well, that's why I'm just like I understand that maybe there was a time when millionaires and billionaires had to assert themselves in a certain way, right? But I feel like social media has influenced the turn of events, right? Because
I just don't see the Paul brothers acting the same way as Elon Musk. And I think
but that's the thing. Right there, I understand what you're saying. Maybe they don't, but because they're a lot fucking dumber than what
I don't think
than
they're dumb.
Elon Musk. Marketing wise, but I'm saying like the shit that they do is dumb. A lot of it, what
but
they
their
say and
audience
do.
is kids. Elon Musk.
No, but they're targeting they're targeting boxers. They're targeting different UFC fighters. They're targeting adults who are within that space, combat sports athletes, other athletes, and stuff like that. And then what they'll do is they'll have a clickbait video, right? Or they'll have a video with a popular, UFC fighter, and it'll get a couple million views. But then they're making money off of those views, off of their subscribers. I think, I don't know, you look at guys like Mr. Beast, right? And the content that he puts out, right? And he's probably worth, I don't even know how much money, but he's worth a fuck ton of money, right? But he does these challenges where, I'm going to give away, $100,000 to whoever stays on the treadmill the longest, something stupid like that. And that video is going to get 150 million views, and he's getting paid a fuck ton of money. But I don't know. I guess Elon Musk just, those type of guys can act whatever the way they want. But I feel like it's also helping because they're within the electric vehicle market.
Yes.
There's different companies that are coming out, like Chevy has one, Tesla. So there's these different companies that are competing with each other.
Yeah.
So what's going to set them apart? Well, get on the the populist side, right? So somebody, if there's like a certain trend, get on that trend, and then people are going to buy your product, and then you're making more. I mean, the electric vehicle market is booming right now, and Tesla's stock just keeps going up.
Well, Tesla's not just a car manufacturer. They have a lot of I think they do a lot of robotics as well. It's not just all cars. I think they're
like AI type stuff, or
it's not AI.
No.
They're most AI they do is their self-driving program, and they're not even legally allowed to call it self-driving anymore in California because it's that bad. And I think they have to call it driving help or something like that, like driving assistance. I think that's what it is. It's literally what Toyota's had for a while, of where it's like, oh, you're starting to lean into the wrong lane. Let me correct that. Only theirs is a way more complicated, and it's like, yeah, you're on the interstate. Put me in. I'll drive for you.
Yeah. No, I get it. I think, like I said, I think that there's a lot of pros to capitalism. I think that there's a lot of opportunity for people within, like, individuals to provide for themselves and their families and to create opportunities for themselves. And that's the one beauty of the United States, that people can complain, they can bitch, they can moan. I do it all the time. I'm sure you do it time to time.
Never.
But, like, oh yeah, never. But think about if you want to own your own business, right? You could do it. It might not be successful, but you could do it.
That's sort of what this is.
But that's what I'm saying. Like,
this is sort of a partnership right now, even though we're making nothing. It's just for fun, really.
Yeah, it's just for fun. So, but we have the opportunity to do that for an hour each week,
Yeah.
And I hope that we can grow this podcast to something that people like and enjoy, But that's the opportunity that we have to do, is to improve, get better, have people on eventually, talk about different topics and stuff. We have that freedom and that luxury, and I feel like as a society, we take it for granted, And maybe there's definitely some cons. There is some cons, but I think that the pros kind of outweigh the cons. Whereas communism, the cons outweigh the pros.
Right now, certainly, and historically speaking, certainly. What do you think? Hold on, let me think for a sec. So, do you think communism will have pros in the future?
It's hard to say, because I think.
Would you ever go out and be like, yeah, now is the time for communism? What would it take to get you there?
I would never say that. No, I don't see communism changing, because I just feel like when it was developed as a system to now, it hasn't really evolved any. I think that it's only the cons will always outweigh the pros for communism.
Always?
Oh yeah, because I think if you're part of the government, right, in Cuba, right, and you have control and you can dictate what people get paid, what jobs they get, all this stuff, you have full control. Why would you ever give that up? If you grew up in a democracy with capitalism for your economic, state, right, or system. So the question might be hard, but think about it. If you grew up in Cuba, right, but your family had access to where, like the click, right, and you were a part of the government, and you were making a fuck ton of money, and you had structure, you had stability, you had for yourself, would you ever give that up?
Yes, I would.
If you grew up, if you were raised in that communist system, right? But what would make you give that up?
Really comes down to I respect democracy a lot for what it is, and even though like the will of the people doesn't always make sense in the moment, I do respect their will and the ability of a democracy quite a bit. And I think a communist state doesn't inherently mean like no democracy whatsoever. I think you can have a democracy. I think you can have a liberal government under a communist regime. Communist regime. That sounds. A regime is different than a communism. Underneath a communist system is what I meant to say.
Yep.
And that's why, like, I could, in some aspects, see myself voting for communism, as long as it looks like the system we're voting for is still, number one, a democracy system. Number two, is still a very liberal system. Because one thing I like my government to be very liberal, even though when I think about policies I like personally, I'm kind of more conservative.
Mm-hmm. So you like an independent kind of like in between.
I want the government to say families should do what they think is best, right? And they shouldn't limit the household of what a family should and shouldn't do. I think putting restrictions on families is evil. I really do. I think when, one topic I think we'll get into at some point, and we'll probably fight about this, is the topic of abortion and why, like, government regulation might be or
I mean,
might
do you
not.
want to talk about it today?
Sure, we can, if you want to go down that road. Yeah, let's just go into it. Where do you fall on abortion?
Pro-life.
You're pro-life?
Yep.
Yep. I am too, in my mind. I just don't support the government regulating it.
No, I think that government needs to stay out of it. I think that I just don't think that it's their issue. I think it's a person-to-person issue. I mean, okay, I'm pro-life. There's obviously circumstances where, if somebody is having a miscarriage, right, then that's completely different than just saying, oh, I'm going to get knocked up so I can kill a baby. Like, that's not okay. That's what I don't agree with.
Yeah, I think it's... I think we're basically on the same page.
Okay.
Surprisingly, like...
Okay. I thought we were going to fight, and I'm like, all right, I'm fucking ready, but...
I was ready to fight this too, but yeah, I feel really uncomfortable saying the government needs to regulate it, unless like 60% of the people say like this is inherently evil. Like, I think the majority of people would say an abortion within 6 weeks is reasonable. That's before a heartbeat. It's mostly cells.
But
it's...
I'll let you finish, sorry.
So, I think a lot of people, you could get them on that stage. If not there, definitely Plan B, right? Most people would say Plan B's reasonable access, right? Would you say that?
Yeah, I'd say so. You can go to your doctor, and then he or she can provide you with assistance.
Maybe a topic similar to abortion, like in the same genre of like families should be allowed to make the best decision for their home, is trans. What do you do if you have a trans kid? Like, the discussion shouldn't be like the government.
Okay, but
let me finish my conclusion.
No, okay, yeah. I interrupted, sorry.
My ultimate thing the discussion should be, what does your doctor say, and what is the best course for the family to do? It shouldn't be the government saying, well, what your doctor says doesn't matter because society thinks what your doctor says isn't best representative as a whole. It's not the government's job to say the doctor's wrong, unless it's like, you need a lot of evidence for me to say doctors are wrong in this instance. And like, it's really hard because it feels like the general conclusion of the medical industry actually has a good understanding of like where trans kids fall on this scale of how to treat them right now. And that is hormone blockers to start off with, and then we'll see like, are they actually trans or whatever. It's where do you fall on?
No, I'm letting you finish here.
Okay.
I have this where like
so
I look different. Yeah.
It goes like hormone blockers, and we'll continue doing like, are you actually trans or not? If you are trans, then that makes it, when you grow up, we can put you on the opposite hormones that you were born with, so you can look more like that, right? Because you actually have gender dysphoria, right? If you don't have gender dysphoria, you're not trans. Like, that's where it comes down to, in my mind. Gender dysphoria is the diagnosis that gets you the actual pills. And I think as long as we make it a very high bar to achieve, which it might start off with hormone blockers, and then like 2 years in, we'll say, yep, after therapy and talking about it, and we know this is the ultimate conclusion, like, they have gender dysphoria, and they will just overall be happier as an adult by looking the opposite gender that they were born with, and by acting the opposite gender they were born with.
Okay, so I just want to make sure I'm understanding you right.
Yes.
You're saying that people are born trans.
Correct. People
Okay.
are born gay. I would say that as well.
Okay, so I have nothing against trans people. I have nothing against gay people at all. I support them. I'll call them he or she by whatever they please. I have no problem with that. But I don't want to hold back. But okay, you can't be born trans.
Why not?
You can't.
Can you be born autistic?
Because, huh?
Can you be born autistic?
Autistic?
Yes.
That's based on your genetics. Yes. If you inherit that gene, yes.
You don't think trans is a genetic issue?
I don't. I think it's a personal. I
think,
think it's a personal development that happens over time. And honestly, the fact that some schools try and push it onto the youth, I don't think that's okay. I don't, because here's the thing: we've gone. No matter your political views, it doesn't matter. There's male and female, and over time, people choose whether they want to have to be the opposite sex that they were born. So I don't think that you can be born trans at all. I don't think that that's, and I think that people might have questions about what they are over time, and they have to figure that out. But here's the thing: a 3, 4, 5-year-old they don't know what the fuck they want. They don't know what the fuck they even are. So now you're saying that somebody's born trans, but guess what? When you're a parent in that delivery room, you see what your kid is. The midwife, see the OBGYN, the doctors, the nurses, they all see what your baby is. So it's a personal development. You might feel different, but you're born one or the other. You're not born both.
So I think there's a different. I think where gender dysphoria, this is. I think you are born with the sex, right? Clearly, but gender dysphoria is like your mind, like your body doesn't match what your mind thinks. Like you look in the mirror and you say, "I shouldn't look this way." It's very alien to kind of think that because I don't have it. But I understand there's a lot of things I don't have that other people experience, right? Like, I don't hear voices in my head that's not my own. And it's kind of weird when you hear about bipolar people hearing voices in their head and telling them to do stuff. That's very alien to me. Would you say bipolar people are born bipolar, or?
I think it all depends. I mean, I think that it can get inhibited over time, but it all depends on your genetics too. If you're, say, both sides of your family, 1 or 2 people have it or multiple people have it, then yeah, the chances of, if you're an only child, if you're one of 4 kids, one of those 4 kids might have it, or 2 of them. But I think that it can also be developed over time too. I mean, I think that suppressing anger and emotions and all this other stuff it's hard, but I think look, I have nothing, I'm not transphobic, I'm not homophobic at all, but I think that we have to get away from the narrative that somebody's born trans. I think that, yeah, and I think that falls under mental health. I really do. I think that falls under mental health, because I think that over time, people are so insecure with their bodies. They're so insecure because they want to feel accepted. They want to feel loved. They want to feel welcome, right? They want to fit in. We had this conversation with girls playing, men's sports, right? I think that falls under the same category, because I think that what's fair for one is fair for all. I think that if you earn it, then yeah, you deserve it. But I think that if a female looks at herself in the bathroom, in the mirror, and goes, you know what, I think I can play baseball, does that mean that she was born to be an MLB All-Star? No, it just means that she thinks that she can do something, and she'll be happy with it. I think it's the same thing. Like, people look at themselves in the mirror, it's like, you know what, I'm not happy as Joe Bestman, so now I'm going to be Josephine. I'm going to change my body over time. So you start with the hormone blockers, and then you start doing X, Y, and Z after that.
To be fair, I don't think hormone blockers would be recommended. Well, I guess it would be. I think they would
It,
just start me on the opposite
it
trait. I think
yeah.
hormone blockers are mostly for like 10-year-olds to like 12-year-olds so they don't develop their shoulders right away. You're just delaying.
But I think it's also, I mean, I think that some people would get insecure because you have a genetic predisposition, right? So when you're born, you already have a genetic makeup, right? So, but you have to work on your body over time. You have to figure it out. Like, okay, I'm really skinny, or people can be born with diabetes, right? But they can change, they can kind of monitor that. They can kind of, what I'm saying, help their bodies over time to not adapt to that, but just get used to it, and then you get it, so you start eating healthy, and you can prevent a lot of things from happening. So I think that you're born with a genetic predisposition. I think that sometimes people are just born one way, and then they think over time that they can change it. I just don't think that pushing it on very young kids is okay, or talking about it in general. If a kid actually, asks a teacher in class, okay, hey, Miss So and So, what is being transgender mean? Then they can the teacher can choose whether or not to talk about it or change the discussion. But
I do want to push back. I in schools, teachers, I don't think are pushing trans like kids to be trans. I think what they do push is overall acceptance of people, and I would say the messaging of schools have gotten it's okay to be weird, right?
Okay.
I think that's the overarching message,
right.
and it's like when you step out of schools and you get into like college kids that push these extremely ideology driven ideas out there, because they think it shouldn't just be accepted, they think it should be normal. I think there's a big conflict of looking at college kids versus at what teachers are actually teaching. And what teachers are teaching is more about acceptance of differences in people.
Okay, so then my rebuttal to that, what age is it okay to talk about that stuff?
I would say,
because here's the thing, at my son's ages, right? They're 3 and 4. They want, let them fucking be kids. Let them play dodgeball. Let them play t-ball. Let them do whatever they want, right? And over time, you can learn the word acceptance, but they don't know, right? Kids, like, what age do you introduce that to?
What, acceptance?
No, like, acceptance of people that, but then you're gonna call them weird. So of weird people,
it's like accepting people that you're not used to. For example, if you grew up in like an all-white town, like there should be some level of education about like black people and how they're normal people, instead of like you going out to a big city. It's like, man, these people are. You see where I'm going with? It's like,
so then why do we have to make it a big thing though? Why? Because here's the thing, like if my kids found out about like transgenders or transgenderism, like all that stuff, like, and they as they got older, they asked questions about it. But why do we have to make it a big deal? Like introduce this person as Josephine, transgender. So don't say anything. But it's like, if you don't know, right? It's not going to be a big topic of discussion. It's not going to be a big, I don't think that we should put them down. I'm not putting them down at all. I just don't think that you're born. I was in the birthing room twice, right? And from my personal experience, I saw both my kids come out, right? They were boys. They were boys on the ultrasound. None of the nurses ever said to me, "This is a transgender kid." Nobody ever said that to me.
Yeah, but it's.
So I
think,
don't.
maybe you answered this, but do you think people are born gay?
I had to think about it, but no.
You don't think people are born gay?
I think it's developed over time.
Really?
Here's why I say that, because you could, growing up, right?
Let me. Can I ask you one more thing?
Yeah, absolutely.
Just going over this.
Yep.
If it's something you can develop, like you can learn to be gay, does that mean everyone's kind of bi? Like everyone can learn to enjoy sucking cock?
Sorry, it's the way you said it. Okay. Think of it this way, right? If you're born gay,
Yes.
right, then you're gonna automatically, right? Every male would be with a male, right? Every female would be with a female, right? Okay, so when you're first born, right? When a kid's first born, do they know what your name is? Do they know what gender you are? Do they know what school is? Do they know? So, no, they don't. Over time, parents can influence their kids one way or the other. Or kids will just figure out on their own. I don't think that you're born, because I think that if you have intercourse with a male, right, just to try it, experimental, right?
That's what they would
But you
say.
don't. But you don't like it, right? Yeah. Okay. That for a fact that's not what I like.
I think to get yourself into a position of like, let's try it, you're probably already bi, which is something I'm not. Like you couldn't. It would be so hard, and I'm very accepting of like different people. It would be very hard to get me in a situation where it's like, yeah, I'll suck your dick, or I'll let you suck my dick. Like, you know what I mean? It's like I have no attraction to broad shoulders. I have no attraction to like the jawline. I have no attraction to inherently masculine figures. I'm very attracted to feminine features. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And I don't think it's absurd that, because it's such a hard program in my mind that I'm very attracted to feminine figures. I don't see why that hard attraction couldn't be reversed of like,
okay,
I'm very attracted to masculine figures.
So I think I have a good example of this, right?
Okay.
Where I said it was developed. Okay, so kid doesn't know when he's young, right? But he has to learn over time. If a boy is on a male sports team, all male sports team, right, growing up, and he doesn't spend a lot of time around other women, that could lead him, right, to have feelings for males over time, right? Because that's what he's around, right? It's the same thing with females, right? If they grow up and they do predominantly female sports, right, and they're constantly around women, that could lead them to become lesbian, right? But I think it's okay. So it's not just co-ed sports, but if you the cheerleaders at a football game, right, and you're trying to put on a show for them, right, that means that yes, I'm around guys all the time on a sports team, right, but there's female cheerleaders who have interest in me, right, and then do I have interest in them? And that's what I think that you have to develop over time is, what are you attracted to? What's in your heart of hearts? What makes you happy, right? And if it's being with another guy, then that's okay. Then I will become accepting of that. But if you're attracted to females, right, because you hang out with girls, you go swimming, right, you have a childhood friend or friends that you grow up with, right, and you spend a lot of time, you get to know them, you see that they listen to you, they're attracted to you, they cheer you on at your sports games, they go swim, you build that attraction over time. So I think it's something that can be developed. I don't think it's something that you're necessarily born with. And maybe some people struggle with it because they're fighting a mixture of feelings. They don't know, they might be attracted to guys secretly, right? But their parents have always pushed them to be with girls, right? Because that's what they wanted. But is that what the son wants? And I think that that's why a lot of people have a hard time, because they want acceptance, they want to be loved and welcome and feel comfortable making their own decisions.
Yeah.
And I don't feel like people have enough of that. I think at first it can be a shock for parents, but I feel like sometimes parents just know the way that the kid acts, the way that they dress, the way that they kind of talk. It's not anything wrong, but people just develop it over time because the kids figure out for themselves as they go along. I think when you're not pushed by and influenced by other people, I think that the choice can be a lot easier for people. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think when you bring up your example of like, oh, you grew up around all guys and like that's what you're attracted to, it's like, yeah, but I think if you engage with sex in prison, that doesn't make you gay either. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like just because you go to prison and you find like the most feminine prisoner there, it's like, oh, I like you. It's
No.
only because your point of reference is so skewed, where you have like these big burly guys, and then it's like, oh, this guy looks the most feminine.
Yeah, but growing up, that's very different.
That's very different.
Yeah, because okay, you don't grow up and like you're not growing up around a bunch of fucking like automatically in prison around a bunch of fucking game bangers. Like when you're born, like when you over time when you're a kid, if you play t-ball, if you play baseball, football, basketball, like soccer, you're gonna be with mainly at a young age. They have co-ed, they have boys and girls on the same team, but over time you kind of differentiate, and now it's all boys, all girls, maybe one girl on the team. But I'm not saying 100% of the time that's going to make somebody gay. I'm saying that a majority of the time, that might, if you, over time, you get used to that idea and you see someone with their shirt off and you're like, wow. Like, you know, if somebody was walking down and you're like, wow, that guy's shredded, but you have a girlfriend, does that mean that I'm attracted to
No.
a guy?
I think you can identify a good-looking body without being like, yeah, I'm gonna go home and jerk off to that tonight.
Yeah, like I think that that's where you have to figure it out for yourself, because like, you know, I'm straight, I have a wife, we have 2 sons together, right? But somebody could go through experiences in life that might alter that, you know what I'm saying, alter their mindset and their thinking. Something happened with a family member, something happened with a friend, something happened with, you know, X, Y, and Z. That doesn't mean that you're gay. That means that you're just confused because something happened that was pretty traumatic and you think that that's the norm, right? But then over time you start to see that that's not what I am. But how do I get away from that mindset, that thinking? So I think it's just, you're not, maybe some people are born gay. I don't know. I would just say, in my opinion, no. That they aren't.
You know what I would be very interested in?
What?
Is like learning statistics of like boys that go to like an all boys school and grew up in that system. Like what percentage of them turn out gay?
Okay, all girls school.
Yeah, same. And versus like people that go to co-ed schools, and what percentage of their population ends up gay there. Because in my understanding, it's about 1% of the population is gay, right? Very minority group. And it's a super minority group of people that actually have like transgender or gender dysphoria. Like we're talking about 0.001% of the population actually develops that. So I'm just very curious of like boys that go to all boys boarding school, only surrounded by males, only have male teachers. Like how many of them not just engaged in sexual, but are attracted to males versus, you know, like co-education schools. That's something I would be very interested in learning about.
Well, it's to that point. I mean, what's college really? You know, it's a fuck fest. It's a place where people go, they drink, they do drugs, they have sex with how many people, they experiment with different things, and they go to class whenever they fucking choose. And if they can afford it, great. And that's the beauty of capitalism. If your mommy, daddy can fucking afford to send you to a 4-year school or however long, right, and pay for your degree, great. You can go fuck off and then, you know, get decent grades if you want, or if you don't want to show up, you know. But you're still hanging out with other people. I think that some people might be confused as to what's actually making them happy. You know, but I think that, you know, people go and they have sex with how many people at college, you know, the University of Florida, people are probably having sex every fucking day,
Yeah.
right? But whatever, great. But how many of them are actually wanting to have sex with a female when they feel like over time they get attracted to a male? I don't know. I couldn't tell you. Not just the University of Florida, just all across.
Should we talk about our next episode?
Before, let's kind of end on a light note because that was pretty. That was pretty. Just
to
deep.
let you know, we're an hour in right now.
No, that's fine.
Okay.
Another 5 minutes.
Sure.
So, I had this conversation with Brandon, and I wish we could have him on the podcast. But I had this conversation with Brandon before. What's one? He asked me, but I'll ask you. What's one animal that you think humans could take? The average human could take on and defeat, and why?
I'm going to go with the
you can
largest.
go large or small, like whatever. Yeah, whatever. Like largest.
The largest animal I think humans could take on is a beach whale.
Like actually, or
I mean, you just poke at it and it's gonna die eventually, right?
I mean,
fight back.
like primal mode kicks in, right? And you're like, what's one animal? Like if you're hiking or you're whatever.
I just thought of the beach whale.
Oh damn, dude! I was like, fucking yeah, with a spear gun. Like hand to hand.
Hand to hand. I think like a deer, a male deer, you could realistically do. I think maybe a black bear you could do. That's about it. That's the extent. Chimpanzees, I think we could take.
Why a chimpanzee?
I think.
Oh, like why any of those?
A deer, I think you can like grab them by the antlers and you have a lot of head control. Like if they don't charge you,
right?
If you like can grab them by the antlers, I think you can wrestle it.
Yeah.
And you can get it into a point where it's fucking helpless like this, unless maybe they can detach their antlers, which I don't know if that's doable, but I feel like you just grab them by the antlers, and I only go this by, like, I see people handle goats, and they drag them by their horns.
Right.
So I think it's really stuck on their head, and I feel like if you control their head, you basically control where they go, and that kind of motion. As far as, what other animals did I say?
Black bear.
Black bears are like
chimpanzee.
Black bears are small. I think like you could walk up and like punch one in the face, and it would be like, what the fuck just happened?
Right.
Like, did you ever see that kangaroo that was like choking a dog, and the guy walked up and fucking knocked it? It's like, what the fuck just happened?
Right.
Like, he's like, do I need to square up? It's like
he wanted all the smoke.
Yeah. So I know kangaroos are bitches. Like humans can take kangaroos easily. Like kangaroo jacks, beta. Like I think
beta male.
I think a kangaroo versus like Tyson.
So is he like an alpha male, like Omega?
What?
Is Tyson like the alpha male?
Yeah.
And then fucking the kangaroo's like beta.
I think if like you were gonna have an alpha of humans, Mike Tyson hits that like
right.
easily. Mike Tyson might be the most alpha of all males.
See, I'm trying to think because I think Brandon and I, we came to the conclusion like a mountain lion would be the
mountain lion.
Yeah.
You would.
No, because it's actually happened. I'm pretty sure it's actually happened.
Okay.
Like there's like, but that's the thing. You have fight or flight, right? Like your primal instinct kicks in, right? Okay. Now you got all that adrenaline, you got all this shit. I mean, there's been, I think it was a hiker. He was on like the edge of a cliff, and he kind of got knocked, and the fucking bear comes storming down. He just kicked the fuck out of it. Just kicked the fuck out of the bear, and the bear kept trying to come back, and he's screaming, hollering, whatever, kicking the fuck out of it. You know, I think it's just that primal, that fight or flight instinct. Mm-hmm. That maybe that's probably the biggest we could go. I think a black bear potentially.
A black bear? Yeah,
if it's like cocaine bear. Absolutely not. You better be on some strong PCP, but
we should
we should
bring back some animal fighting and like dope them up.
like chickens or
this is
something.
your mind on cocaine, and this is your mind on PPC.
Yeah.
See how the PPC bear mauls the shit out of the cocaine bear?
I think that's what we should do. Like, but we should give you the cocaine, right? Go against the bear. we'll give you the PCP, so you're like indestructible, and then
I just come back like mauled. I don't come back actually. You guys, if the bear like holds me down and eats me alive, it's like, nah, he thinks he can still take it, guys. And I'm like screaming, but I'm screaming like, I'm gonna get you to the bear because I'm not even realizing what's going on. And I just die like that.
Yeah.
What a way to go out. Honestly,
yeah, I think
if that happened,
yeah,
I hope you record it.
Absolutely. I'll have Brandon there for support so he can shoot the bear.
Be like, yeah, this bear murdered my friend, so it's
Right.
like can't let it go on.
No, I think it was a good episode.
Yeah.
I think we'll end there.
Let's talk about our next guest. So we have one of the top chemists we have ever met. Definitely within the top 10 chemists I've met. Coming on next show to talk about colonialism.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, he's very against it. And so we're just going to talk. And we're going to talk about, like, why it's actually beneficial. And why, like, societies deserve to be colonialized.
Yeah. So
Where do you fall on this topic?
I fall as the moderator. I fall, and I'm gonna let you and Sean debate that.
Yeah, let me destroy my reputation with my hot takes.
Yeah.
And my uneducated ways.
Yeah, all 5 viewers are gonna cancel us. So.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, tune in next week, guys, for week 3. Have a good night.
Peace.